Okay, so last week we deviated from our parak that we've been on. We've been doing chapter 4, but we went to 1-6 because we did Don Escol on Lekavzuchus. And while we were there, I figured we should go over the first two clauses of the Mishnah. Now, usually what happens, my procedure is I prepare on Shabbos with my chavrusa, and then we usually find some approach which I develop enough to give shiur on, like for Thursday night shiur. This week we encountered a lot of interesting ideas, but no like super revolutionary like I don't know like chidushim, no like super revolutionary new ideas. But the good news is that these are tried and true sources. You know, there are certain sources that I go over like every couple of years, and the Rambams that we're about to do are one of them. And I figure once we're doing the Rambam, we'll throw in the trifecta. So the trifecta on Pirkei Avos is Rashi, Rambam, Rabbeinu Yonah. I find that if you want to learn Pirkei Avos and you got those three Mefarshim, then you're set. And it's not that the other ones are not good. It's that those three, first of all, they're available in all the Gemaras. And they are going to provide you with a nice little diverse group of ideas and give you plenty to think about. So I figure what we'll do is this is going to be more like a unplanned chavura. We'll just learn together. I don't have any agenda. I don't have any like ideas in mind, but we'll see what we discover. Okay. And at the very least, we'll just get a lot of good commentaries and good ideas. Okay. Even if it's not revolutionary. Okay. So we translated it last time. Yeshua ben Parachia Omer, Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a teacher, uknei lecha chaver, acquire or literally purchase for yourself a friend, and then Vevidanas kolam lekavzchus, and judge every person favorably. And like I mentioned last time, we're going to take the assumption this time around that the three clauses are not related. Okay. And there are Mefarshim who take them as related. Maybe if we want to, we'll continue it next week and do more Mefarshim and see ones that relate them. But none of the three Mefarshim that we're doing tonight relate all three of them together, at least not explicitly. Okay, so what are the questions here? Yeah, Vanessa.
Okay, two questions. One, what does each verb mean? So what does it mean to make a aseh and uknei lecha? And then more specifically, it feels like, sorry, I'll let you finish first question before
Sure,
asking
and
second.
uknei, acquire or purchase. And then I guess the implicit question here is, and why is each used in its clause? Yeah.
And then this is kind of wrapped up in question one, but I'm not sure. I feel like if you were to intuitively say this the way we understand it, just like shot, we'd say the opposite. We'd say to like get a Rav, like that. I feel like that's like the first thing you say to
Yeah,
like about the Shuba, like you need a Rav, go get a Rav. And then like
right.
every parent to their kid, go make friends, go out. Like we would intuitively use the opposite verbs, and I don't think that that's the Hebrew English translation issue. I think like the mentality is different for each. So why is it flipped here?
Yeah, that's a great question. That question never occurred to me. Okay. Furthermore, doesn't the opposite make sense? We usually say, get a Rav and make a friend, right? Yeah. So that's a great question. I actually am going to put that in the previous question, even though I think it is good to articulate, but I think it'll be answered with that. So not that we are keeping score about which questions are numbered. Yeah. Alex.
I'm curious why it's only like acquire a friend and it doesn't specify what kind of friend,
Right.
why to do it.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like we should ask that for, yeah, I guess it does make more sense for friend, right? So why does it seemingly just say a friend without specifying what kind of friend? And in fact, I think you could bring a proof from Pirkei Avos if you knew where to look, which I might not. If you look up chaver, so in the next mishnah, the same I guess his friend, Nita Harabelli says, Harcha mishachin ra, distance yourself from a bad neighbor, ve'al tischabra la Russia, and do not become friends with the Russia. So like he's qualifying what his friend said before, and then also in chapter 2:9, I think this is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I think. Yeah, says go out and see what is an upright path to cling to. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Ayin Tova. Rabbi Eliezer says a good eye. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Chaver Tov, a good friend. right? And then he says, what's the bad path that you should avoid? Chaver ra. So it's not like the word like, in other words, if the word friend automatically implied good friend, okay, fine. But like clearly in Pirkei Avos, in the next mishnah and the next parak, they have to specify, okay, right? So it's not automatically a good friend. Okay, so I'll just add that here also. And don't claim that friend automatically implies good qualities, because the next mishnah says don't befriend a Rasha, and the next chapter says you should get a chaver tov and avoid a chaver ra. Chaver ra. Okay, good question. Yeah, Tamar.
Maybe a minor question, but like, is this specifically singular, or could it mean
Well, that's a
plural?
good question, right? Both clauses are stated in the singular, but is that their meaning? Okay, in other words, we can see an argument for why you should have only one Rav. I'm not saying that you should, I'm just saying we can see an argument, okay? But presumably you should have multiple friends. So why not K'nei Lecha Chaverim? That would be very easy to say. Vanessa.
Okay, I don't know if this is one or two questions. What's the Havamina? That's the general question. And then more specifically, I can understand why you need a Rav. Like, that's kind of intuitive. I don't really get what's the purpose of saying it. Like, that's still not the Havamina, but why do you need a friend? That's less intuitive.
Okay, so what is the erroneous premise or the erroneous assumption we'd be prone to making before learning this? I think I just find Havamina differently every time. Okay, so you said sorry, you said, what do you say, which one's the one that makes sense? Or sorry, which one's the one that you would have a Havamina?
Yeah, I have a Havamina for Aseh Lecha. Actually, no, I don't have. Either way, I don't get what the Havamina is.
Okay,
I
right.
think I do have two separate questions.
In
Fine.
other words, like you're saying, it's obvious that you should get a Rav for yourself, and it's obvious you should have a friend. So why would you think otherwise?
Yeah, and then I have a separate question of
Yeah.
like, friends are nice, fine,
Yeah.
but why is the Mishnah telling us that it's good to have a friend? Like, I can understand, okay, get a Rav, because you need to learn Torah, and like you can't just go about it on your, like, whatever. You can make arguments for that like pretty easily, but from like, especially for like, if we're talking about the chassid in training, like why do you have to have a friend?
Okay,
It
but
doesn't say
why?
chavrut, it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, why does the Mishnah need to tell us to get a friend? Okay, and then I'm gonna you kind of acknowledge the question that we were gonna ask at some point anyway. So, who is the intended audience? So like at this point, it seems, we would say like it seems like everyone needs this advice. But if Pirkei Avos is for leaders and or the chassid in training, does he really need to be told to get a Rav and a friend? Yeah, seems weird. Okay, Alex.
I'm curious if anyone's ever interpreted a Aseh Rav to be a statement on like what you should be doing, like going out and doing chinuch.
Make yourself into a Rav?
Yeah.
Yeah, I also wondered that. I have not seen that, but this time I did not get a chance to do an exhaustive search. But I will list that question in case it comes up. Which will, again, so this is not going to come up this time. I know that for sure. Okay. Is it possible to read? Well, actually, hold on just a second. I shouldn't say it's not going to come up. No one explicitly reads it that way, but maybe we can force someone into that this time. Okay. To read the first clause as make yourself into a Rav. Yeah. And you have another one? Or what was that?
No, just like going forward, like if the audience is like people who are at a higher level, I could see it being interpreted that way.
That would make sense, right? Okay. I feel like those are the main questions. Are we, I mean, one, I guess, implicit question, I don't know if the Mishnah is saying this, but we'll add it anyway here. I'm just going to add it over here because it makes sense here, is actually, I'm going to just attach this to the first question. Do either of these clauses or these verbs imply an answer to the how question, and to what extent? In other words, the Mishnah might not be telling you how to go about doing this, it's just telling you that you should do this. Or maybe you can infer something about how to do this here. You know, how to win, what's the book? How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah. Okay, so I think what we should do is do what we've been doing, which is to go through the Mefarshim and then analyze, okay? And I think the way I want to do this is I want to take each clause and briefly discuss each of the Mefarshim here. And since I don't have any ideas planned, I think maybe what we'll do is, all right, for the Rav one, I think I want to do all three of them, Rashi, Rambam, Rabbeinu Yonah, and then compare and contrast. And then for the friend one, I think we'll take each one and analyze it on its own. Okay, so I have these in various states of translation or non-translation. So Rashi, I did not get time to translate because I copied and pasted it 5 minutes ago before the shiur started. Oh, hold on a second. I'm just going to make this into a 0, 0, and 1. Okay, so make a Rav for yourself. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. Lilmod min hashmua, to learn from the oral tradition. Shmua is literally that which is heard. Okay. Velo min svara, and not from svara, which we could translate as reasoning or theory. Okay. So that's a little ambiguous, I think, right? I mean, let's just, if we had to summarize this here, summary of Rashi, okay? I mean, what is he saying? I feel like there are 2 ways to read that. Yeah, Vanessa?
I'm not sure I fully get how to translate svara, but if I'm understanding correctly, it could be saying like that way you're rooted in like an actual tradition and not just on like the whims of your capacity to understand and rationalize things.
Okay, so that's a good direction. Let me actually just articulate the. Let's just hold on, just 1 second here. I'm a step behind you. Is that I think there's just 2 ways to understand to parse the Rashi, or to say what he's telling us as opposed to why. Alex?
It seems like it's implying that it's not enough to learn on your own, that you need that outside source and that kind of Masorah.
Okay, so maybe there are 3 possibilities now. Okay, so let me get these out, and we'll see here. Is or tomorrow, you want to say something before I explicate it?
I was wondering if you could read the Dibur Maskil as part of the Rashi.
Yes, definitely. Aseh lecha rav lilmod min hashmua v'lo min hasvara. To learn from the oral tradition and not from svara. Yeah, so I think there are. We'll find out. Okay, but there are. Oops, sorry, I'm just saying here. There might be 3 ways to read this Rashi. Okay, so one is why did it change fonts on me? One is the reason you should the reason the Mishnah is telling you to get a Rav is for the purposes of Shmua. Okay, and we'll just use Shmua for oral Torah. Okay, it is not telling you to get a Rav for the purposes of Svara. Okay, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, it's just beyond the scope of the Mishnah. Okay, the second way is you might think that the Mishnah is telling you to get a Rav for Svara, and Rashi is correcting you and saying no, it's not telling you that. It's telling you to get a Rav for Shmua. Okay, so the difference here is like the first reading is just basically saying like it's just. I mean, maybe these two are very. I mean, these two are very close in meaning, but like in other words, like hold on just a second. Like okay, if you if I say like get me a pen and not a pencil, I might just be saying and not a pencil because I want to clarify the scope of my advice. But the other is I think that you think I'm telling you to get a pencil. I'm saying no, not a pencil, get a pen. Like I'm trying to disabuse you of the notion of that I'm telling you to get a pencil. And Alex, what did you just you said something that made me think of third possibility. Just say what you said again.
I was saying it makes me think it's along the lines of you need a Rav because you alone aren't enough with your Svaras. You need to have that Masorah and traditional aspect of
Okay,
learning.
yeah, right. So it's saying so. This is this is actually a different one, which is why did it change fonts? Okay, you need a Rav so that you can learn from his shmua and not just rely on your own svara. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and I think it intuitively makes more sense it being in Pirkei Avos because you're assuming someone's at a higher level. They might think,
Okay.
oh, I could bypass a Rav.
Okay, good. I think that is probably the most likely interpretation here. Yeah. Okay. So, all right, maybe we'll analyze the Rashi while we're here. Okay. So, what's the main idea here? And again, we'll go with Alex's reading because I do think that that's the most plausible one here. And Alex is kind of saying like why you need this, but like, what's the Havmina? What is the Hava Amina? So say one more time, Alex.
You would assume if you're at a higher level that your reasoning is alone enough to learn.
Right. You're on a high enough level of learning and thinking, I guess, right? I think it's both, like a certain mastery. You can you can figure stuff out on your own with your own mind. Okay. Kamash Malan, which is the Gemara phrase that we use for therefore it teaches us what? So what's the idea of getting a Rav? And by the way, I want to clarify afterwards what the scope of this is in the world we live in today, because it's different than the world that was back then. But I won't comment on that yet. That's just like a hint. It's like, why do you need a Rav? Yeah, tomorrow.
I would say like you need to be grounded in the facts of the Masorah.
Exactly. No matter how good your mind is, your best theory is only as good as the facts it's based on. And now here's the part is the only way to access those facts is from a Rav. Now, this is something that is different now than it was then. So back then, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is, it's a Mishnah, right? So this was the first time that Torah Sheba'al Peh was written down, okay? But prior to the Mishnah, like when Yoshua ben Parachi was saying this, the only way to get facts was from learning from a live Rav, okay? So like it was really critical to get that. Big question now is like, how have things changed in a world where we have written down Torah Sheba'al Peh, we have books, we have access to stuff, okay? And I think this is actually a question that we should ask. Yeah, Shmua is, yeah, sorry, hold on a second here. From Shmua, I meant to put this in the brackets here, which means oral tradition, literally that which is heard. Yeah, so Shmua is Torah Sheba'al Peh is the oral Torah, or more accurately, I'll say data or facts from the oral Torah. Okay. Yeah. And if you have more clarification question, then you can ask. Yeah, Alex, what do you want to say?
Read your question about how it's different today. To
Yeah.
me, it seems like the big difference is that today there's a lot more accessibility to learning, so you would think like, oh, I could just do this shiur online. I don't need a connection to the Rav.
Yeah.
But in reality, you need that connection, because if you have a shiur or something, your context is what will paint the kind of response you have.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing. So I guess the question here is, where do you draw the line? I mean, you need a Rav for many things. You need a Rav for guidance in methodology, in psak, in mentorship, and all this stuff. Seems like Rashi is focused on shmua versus svara, right? So like that's kind of what I want to know how to apply nowadays. In other words, what you just said, I think would apply even back then, of like knowing the context for the shaila and like knowing how to apply your own reasoning and stuff like that. But how does our engagement of shmua? We're in a world now where it's not entirely dependent on a Rav, because I could open up a book or I could look online. So what is the what is still the same and what's different? Yeah, Tamar.
I have a separate question.
Okay, hold on just a second. I'm just going to add to this here. How much when much of the Torah is written down? What has changed about Shmua when we can access it through books? Okay, will you remember your question?
I think so.
Okay, Racheli?
Yeah, so I think this is like why it's still necessary to have a teacher.
Yeah.
Because there is like the aspect of teaching like live from teacher to student includes let me think how to say this. Like the teacher assesses the student's temperament, where they're coming from, what like the underlying maybe reasons for the questions they're asking or whatever, stuff like that. And I know from my own experience, like I've read books that were definitely better for other audiences, where like they didn't actually help me at all, and I didn't find the information like satisfying, or it could have even been harmful in some senses. Like I did not need to hear that, and maybe I shouldn't have heard that or read that, whatever.
Right.
And I think with a teacher who has a close relationship with the student, like it's part of the responsibility of the teacher to have that wisdom and understanding of the person that they're teaching. And it's not just about conveying wisdom, but also how and to who.
Okay. Okay, so I think you are answering the question, but I do want to clarify the scope of the question just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So just I wrote on the screen, I am not asking what role do teachers still play, because it's clear that they play a lot of roles, okay? Because it's clear they play a lot of roles. No, but I think you can still adopt your answer to what I'm saying here. I'm asking, what role does a teacher need specifically in Shmua, okay? Which is factual oral Torah data. Okay, so I'm going to translate what you said, Racheli, into an answer to this question specifically, which is information is not just information. Okay, there still needs to be an assessment of how, when, and what information is presented. Okay, so for example, I had a good example of this recently. Give me 1 second. It was in my high school chat. I could go back and read it, but in other words, so I have this Q&A chat, and first of all, when a student asks a question, I have to decide, is this the type of thing to answer in a chat, in like a one-line thing? Or does this need like a shiur and a context and a discussion? And then if I am doing a one-line thing, which facts should I present, or which facts might be distorted based on their background knowledge or their lack of background knowledge, and then what order do I present it in? Like there are certain things that I would not introduce to someone now, either because intellectually or emotionally it's not gonna land in the right way. And so I have to like dole it out at a specific time, or in a specific group setting, or maybe, I don't want to say it in something that everyone's going to hear. I have to do it in a way where only people are ready, So like this is all still even in factual information. Then like, for example, I'll give you an example that is like relatable, right? in our school, we have people coming from all sorts of different religious backgrounds. Okay, so let's say you have a student who's coming from a completely secular or non-religious background, and then someone asks a question about nida. I'm not just going to spring nida on someone who has no background and just like give facts. Like that would not, it would just not be understood in the right context, or let's say, for example, a more common example, or at least that comes up more in my chats, is the death penalty, right? Like, I think there is a general awareness among Orthodox Jews, at least that I've met, is that the death penalty is not something that was, implemented a lot. But like when you first hear about, death penalty for violating Shabbos, it's like a shock to the system, and if you don't have the background, you don't know how to handle that. So that's how I would adapt what Rachel is saying to this answer. Okay, yeah, Tamar?
My question was in terms of taking Rashi to be saying kind of like you need facts, you can't just totally go on your own.
Yeah.
If that's what that means, then what kind of it seems like a very simple havamina to me.
Okay, good question. I want to get back to that in a little while. I have a couple more answers for this one. Yeah, Vanessa?
I hope I'm getting the question right, but if the whole point of like Torah Sheba'al Peh is it's like a conversation, it's not just like, okay, you read Tanakh and you get it. Like the whole difference is that it was an oral transmission, like it was a conversation. So if you're just learning it on your own, yeah, you can read it, but like there are also, what is it? I think the people in Korea, like they'll just read the Talmud, but like they're not chachamim. Like they learn it really well, but they're not, it's absolutely not the way we learn Torah, because there's no conversing, there's no like Masorah passed down, like there's no, you're divorcing yourself from that process. I'm not so articulate, but you're nodding, so I think you're kind of getting what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah. Okay, right. So in other words, I'm just trying to think about whether this is included in my first answer or whether this is a separate element. I guess to clarify what I meant the first time, information.
I think it's less about information and it's more about like the process of conversing with another person and like going into the little instant. Like it's not, I don't think, and I'm not a Talmudic scholar, so I think this is also just difficult for me to think about, but like I don't think the whole point is just like playing logic games and like getting the best intellectual answer. Like it's not just that, like it's also to
Let me clarify one thing, okay?
Yeah.
And this will become clear when we read Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah, is I do not believe Rashi is talking about understanding, but like analysis, like analytical understanding. I think he's talking about shmua, which is the facts. And just give an example of this, okay? Is I'm just going to stick with the same Rambam example that I always give. Rambam gives an example of I'll read it of what is Torah Sheba'al Peh. And again, I should have clarified this, is that people get Torah Sheba'al Peh and Talmud mixed up because even in yeshiva circles, then people use the terms very loosely, and that's not that they're not synonymous in the world of the Rambam or Chazal necessarily. So let me just read to you Rambam's definition in the introduction of the commentary on the Mishnah. You should know, shekol mitzvah shenasan kadosh baruch hu Moshe Rabbeinu nitna lo in pirusha. You should know that every mitzvah that God gave to Moshe, he gave it to him with its explanation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu omer lo hamikra, God would tell him the pasuk, ve'achar kach omer lo perusha ubi'ura v'chol ma shekolol osa hamikra hamechukam. And so you tell him the pasuk, and then you tell him its explanation, its elucidation, and everything included in the this is not the right use of the word wizened pasuk, okay, meaning a pasuk that is like packed with data. Okay, then he goes through how they would learn it, and then he gives an example. So the example is I'll give you an example. Amar lo, Hashem said to him, Basukos teshu shivas yamim. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days, in huts. Okay, that's the Torah Sheba'al, that's the written Torah. V'gam hodiya Hashem Yisrael shesukkah zo chova al hazacharim v'lo hanakevos. That this sukkah is an obligation on men and not women. That's shmua number 1. It is not obligatory for people who are sick, nor for people who are traveling. That's shmua number 2. And you only use as schach something that grows from the ground. That's shmua number 3. You cannot use as schach wool or silk or vessels or anything, even that would grow from the ground, like woven mats and garments. That's number 4. And eating and drinking and sleeping in it are all 7 days. And its dimensions cannot be less than 7 handbreadths long and 7 handbreadths wide. And its height cannot be more than 10 tefachim. Or sorry, cannot be less than 10 tefachim. Okay, so those are examples of shmuas. Now, each of those things that he said can split itself into more categories, like what kind of eating, what kind of drinking has to be in the sukkah. So you'd explain that as well. And like, what does it mean to be sick? What does it mean to suffer in the sukkah? He didn't mention that. But all of this is factual information, okay? That's what we call Torah Sheba'al Peh. Talmud is understanding the conceptual analysis of those things, how to apply them to cases that are ambiguous, how to derive new principles from them, how these principles derive from their sources. So that is Talmud, and that's not what Rashi's talking about here, because Shmua means specifically Torah Sheba'al Peh. Okay, so I don't know if that changes anything that you were saying, Vanessa, but we're talking about factual information here.
It clarifies it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Now this we'll partially comment on tomorrow's thing also. Okay, but I want to give another thing here also. Okay, so I think another mistake here is nowadays, just because you can read something or translate it doesn't mean you're getting the facts. Okay, and I see this all the time we know you can misunderstand the facts of what you're reading. And I see this also all the time in, using ChatGPT. Like, ChatGPT is very good at translating, but like it makes a lot of mistakes. And it's not I'm not even talking about hallucinations. I'm talking about just like mistakes, factual mistakes. And like when I ask it to translate, I still think that ChatGPT translating is better than going without anything. But like, I know how to learn. I know in terms of like how to read and translate, and I need to be able to call it out on making mistakes here. So just because I think there's a mistake now that just because people have access to the English, then somehow they understand it, and like that's just not how this works. It'd be like, if you open up a medical textbook or a medical paper, but you're not trained in how to read that stuff, you can understand the words, but that does not mean that you're understanding what's being said on a factual level, not even understanding it, just on a factual level. Yeah, Racheli?
Yeah, I feel like I literally just had this experience in a class the other day where I was like, we had to like prepare Rashi for Chumash class, and like the whole class, I thought I had an understanding of it, just like the basic shot of the Rashi.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I asked a question because I didn't understand something, and my teacher like re-explained the Rashi that we had prepared for homework, and I was like, wait, I completely did that wrong. And like I had checked the translation, whatever, and it was just like misunderstanding the English translation. So yeah.
Right. Good. So that actually brings me to my third point, which is when you're learning Shmua from a live Rav, they can check for understanding, okay, in a way that cannot be done solo. Okay. So I think that's a third reason. Now, maybe there are more reasons also, but I just want to clarify that in the realm of factual learning, it is a fallacy to think, or it's false to think that like we have access to all the facts now and we don't need a Rav. We could just like open books and get facts. Like, no, that's not the case. Another example of this, by the way, which I think falls into all three categories, is someone showed me, this is unfortunately a whole genre of videos of like some Christian guy opening up Sfaria and like reading excerpts from the Talmud that paint Jews in a bad light, and like this guy just does not know what he's doing. Like he's reading the English translations. They are good English translations, but there's no context for the facts. And like, and misunderstanding words. Like, for example, one of the things that non-Jews love to mix up, I don't mean they love to mix it up, but like mixing up the notion of something not being penalized versus it not being usher. You know, they think that if there's no penalty for something, then that means it's permitted. So the distinction between permitted and forbidden but without a punishment, like a court punishment, are two completely separate things. Just because something is, you know, in halal we have patur aval aser. You're exempt from penalty, but it's prohibited to do, you know? And so like there's just a lot of misunderstandings about all this stuff. Yeah. Okay. Now going back to what Tamar said. So Tamar's question was, let me just go back and so this is Tamar's question. So tell me if this is the right question, Tamar, which is if the main idea is really what Rashi was saying, okay, that seems to be a very rudimentary mistake in thinking, okay, to think that you don't need facts to come up with good theories. Is that what your question is?
Yeah.
Okay. Why would Avos need to teach us this? Okay, anyone have any answers?
Can I clarify a little bit, actually?
Yeah.
I don't really think that like no one ever would think this, I guess. It's more like I'm imagining like someone who's some kind of Torah scholar already. How could they think that?
Right. How could right to advanced chachamim. Yeah, Racheli?
Like just because you're very learned, it doesn't mean you're never wrong. And like just to go from the answer 3 from earlier, like when you're learning with a live person, they can I forgot the word, but they can point out a mistake. Even if you're like a very smart learned person, you can still be incorrect sometimes.
Right, but I think Tamara's saying like if we're right about the main idea, we're saying the main idea is that theories are not worth anything unless they're based in correct facts. And if the only way to get facts is from a Rav, then you need to make sure you get correct facts. So like you might need to tell an elementary student that, not elementary school, but like a basic student. But like if you're a great Talmid Chacham of the type that needs Pirkei Avos, you don't need to tell him that you got to get facts before you have theories. Like he knows that already. Yeah, Alex?
I think there's this reality in that when you're at a higher level, there is a chance you could distort things because you have facts. And so I think having a Rav, having kind of an outside, not fence, but something to kind of keep you in check is important. Because I've definitely met a lot of people that are very learned,
Yeah.
but then they say things and you're like, no, you're distorting that to fit what you want it to say.
Okay. So I think that's going to be the gist of the answer, which is that very learned people are prone to a special kind of this mistake. Okay. Namely, overestimating the value of their thinking and underestimating the value or the need to get all the facts. Okay. So before we go to Torah, examples that come to my mind are Aristotle, Aristotle basically like inventing science. Okay. Recognizing that it's empirical, okay, but then vastly underestimating how specific the factual data needs to be. Okay. So that's one example. Another example is I will not say that this happens in our yeshiva, but great Torah scholars thinking they can arrive at truth without relying on reliable editions and manuscripts of the texts we care about. Okay, and again, I cannot tell you how many times people just pull off a Rambam from the shelf that is not a legit Rambam or not rely on the most up-to-date versions of manuscripts. And I want to just, or even worse, you point out to someone that the Rambam definitely did not write this. This is definitely a mistake or a forgery. and they just ignore it because in their mind they're so attached to theory that like to svara, that like the svara is all that matters. Another example is again in science, great thinkers thinking that they have all the data and that now is the time to theorize, okay? When in reality, they need to gather more data before they can theorize, okay? And I'll give you an example of this. I first heard this from Rabbi Chait, but it sounded like he was quoting this from somewhere else that, hold on just a second. No, actually, I want to read one thing and then I'll quote from Rabbi Chait, and I see your hand tomorrow. Great mystery story. Yeah. So this is in Einstein and Infeld's book, The Evolution of Physics. And so he's describing the process of science. So he says, in nearly every detective novel since the admirable stories of Conan Doyle, there comes a time when the investigator has collected all the facts he needs for at least some phase of his problem. These facts often seem quite strange, incoherent, and wholly unrelated. The great detective, however, realizes that no further investigation is needed at the moment, and that only pure thinking will lead to a correlation of the facts collected. So he plays his violin or lounges in his armchair enjoying a pipe, when suddenly, by Jove, he has it. Not only does he have an explanation for the clues at hand, but he knows that certain other events might have happened. Since he now knows exactly where to look for it, he may go out if he likes to collect further confirmation for his theory. So those three stages: collecting facts, realizing that you're at the time when you should just stop and thinking, and then coming up with an insight, and then going out and getting more facts. It's very possible for an advanced thinker to mistake when that needs to happen. Now, again, granted, in science, you're always getting new facts, whereas in Torah Sheba'al Peh, the facts, there's no new facts coming out. But like, it still is knowing when you have all the facts is necessary in order to come up with good theories. And thinkers who are very talented at thinking might stop prematurely. And then that leads me to the Rabbi Chait anecdote that he said, one day there were these two chickens and they were talking to each other. And one chicken said, this man must, he said, I must be a king because this man every day brings me a ton of food and I just eat it all up. And so this goes on for several days. And then finally one day the guy takes the chicken and then he shechs him, So what was the chicken's mistake is he theorized too early. He didn't have all the facts, right? So like he stopped. It was like, oh, every day I get fed must be that I'm a king. He didn't stop to think, well, maybe I need to collect more facts or do some more observation. Yeah, Tamar?
I was going to give a slightly different possible interpretation, but I think it's a little bit of a stretch, and I also think it's less necessary with some of the explanations that you said.
Okay, so mention it anyway, because even if it doesn't work with Rashi, it's possible that it might touch on things that other Mefarshim are going to say.
Okay, so it's still about the facts, which is so. But I think this is a stretch for Aseh Lecha Rav. That's what I was going to say. So, but maybe somebody, I don't know, on a medium level, it's not really, something like that, might be disinclined to defer to the facts. This is something in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I do like that idea, and I'll assess whether I think it's in line with the mission or not. But that's another good function of a Rav, which is that psychologically, and I don't know if you would use that term, but I'm going to say it this way. You can tell me if you're saying differently. Psychologically, having having the facts isn't enough. You need to defer to the facts and subordinate yourself to the facts, and receiving the facts from a Rav has a different psychological impact than collecting them on your own. I think that's a truth. Or more bluntly, okay, the Rav yelling at you that you need to accept the facts and stop ignoring them, okay, can set a person straight, in a way that is hard to simulate on your own. Again, that happens. Again, I'm just speaking from years of experience in shiur. Is it's very easy to just get lost in your theory, and like the Rav needs to bring you back and like get you straight with the facts, and like you cannot ignore this important fact. Yeah. Also, maybe this is a fifth function. Okay. So when dealing with an area where there are a lot of facts, you might. Okay, I'm going to put it this way. There's an intuition that comes from having broad knowledge that causes certain facts to light up in certain situations. Okay, so for example, this is a funny thing. Like, we don't know how far AI is going to go. I don't think it's hard for me to imagine that this is going to be the case with AI, but like there's a phenomenon in shiur where like, even not with a Rav and a student, but like, it could come up in either way, where like you're talking about a topic and like someone mentions, oh, I was listening to a shiur and like this point, came up and this is relevant for me to mention, or like you'll be learning something and you'll remember a Gemara from somewhere else, and it's like, those are all intuitive processes that are factual. You're recalling verbal statements, but you can't account for what brings them up at this time. So like, if you're doing that by yourself and you have a limited fact base, it's a different experience than someone who has broad familiarity with the entire set of facts, or even having another mind to do that. But certainly a superior mind. Okay, let's move on now to, what might happen, by the way, maybe we'll just do Aseh Lecha Rav this time, and then K'nei Lecha Chaver next time. We'll see. All right. Because that was a lot more. I didn't even plan to do Rashi until like a couple minutes before this year. So I'm glad we did Rashi. Okay. Actually, we're going to do something even different. Hold on. I actually want to go to Rashi on K'nei Lecha Chaver because his first interpretation of K'nei Lecha Chaver is so shocking and so related to what we're doing now that I think it's going to be better learning if we do that. Okay. So Rashi says like this. Okay, and extreme introverts, prepare to rejoice. K'nei Lecha Chaver, what does it mean to acquire a friend for yourself? This refers to books. Okay, and so a friend is get books. Okay, then he says v'amri la, and some say a literal friend. Okay, so what I want to do now is, so Rashi goes on and he says about the literal friend. I think that we can refer to next time. But like, why would Rashi say primary meaning of this when it says get a friend is get books? And then, by the way, you could also interpret friend as an actual flesh and blood friend, Okay, so I think that's my question. Okay, so question is like, where is Rashi getting this from? And then why would he seemingly give precedence to interpreting friend, he was an introvert, as books, and then say maybe it means a literal friend? Okay, that's my main question. Yeah, Vanessa.
Okay, so this.
Oh, sorry. One more thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just a second. One more question is where'd the mouse go? Oh, one more question is, having just said everything we said about how books can't substitute for a Rav, okay, what does Rashi envision the relationship between learning from a Rav and learning from books to be? Okay, in other words, like, how do we reconcile those two things? Yeah, Vanessa.
Can I ask a factual question?
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, tomorrow, go ahead. Or whoever just said that.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I hope this is okay to jump in with this. Just also,
Yeah, sure.
like, factually at the time of the Mishnah, what books were around?
That is a good question. I mean, he cannot. I don't think he can be talking about Torah B'Ksav, because he would just say Tanakh, right? And like, you don't need to acquire that. I mean, unless he's saying you should acquire that, that would be interesting. But I feel like he would say that more. That's a very good question. Let me just check the edition of Rashi that I have here and see if they specify. I don't think they do. Sorry. Lecha Svarim 4. Near at the footnote says near Shapirish Kain Mipnei Halashon Ukne. Oh, so that's answering a different question, saying that it seems like he is getting that from the fact that it says purchase. So he's basically saying, like, well, you can't purchase another human being as a friend, but you can purchase books. So you could say that. Now, I will say, I don't know if this is an answer. This is a very speculative answer, but no, this is too speculative. I was going to say, even before the Mishnah was compiled, there were written notes that people had, but I don't think that's what Rashi's referring to. One thing that's making me question is maybe Rashi. See, I don't get this. Let me just check something out here. Yoshua ben Pirachia. When did he live? Yeah, right. So he lived in the latter half of the 2nd century BCE. The Mishnah was written in the 3rd century CE. Okay, so this is like 300 years before the Mishnah. And according to many, the Mishnah was not even written down at first. It was just compiled and then still passed down orally. So it really is a question, which books is Rashi referring to? I'm going to actually add that to our questions here. Which books is Rashi referring to, considering that Yoshua ben Parachia lived around 300 years before the Mishnah was compiled, and there were no Torah Shabbal Peh books to speak of, and then seemingly he can't mean books of Torah Shebichsav, because then he'd say so. Good question, Tamara. That did not occur to me. Okay, but let's ignore that and just assume that he does mean books for us, okay? And just ignore that for now, okay? Just ignore the facts. Yeah. All right, yeah. Vanessa?
My big idea was going to be that he got it from the word kanaf, so that.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, right. That is so that's actually answer to question number 1, which is that Rashi is leaning heavily into K'nei, and the only friends you can literally buy, I mean, this is also post-slavery, okay, so you can't buy slaves, okay, literally buy are books, okay? So, something's got to give. You either have to say that purchase is not literal or friend is not literal, or purchasing a friend is not literal. So he's going with the purchasing friend the friend is not literal. Okay. Yeah, Vanessa?
When I first was becoming religious, I learned Pirkei Avos with my then boyfriend, and he actually implied he was like, no, it doesn't mean literally buy a friend, but it's worth it to spend money on dinners and take them out and really work on friendship, and that's a thingy. That's just
So there actually is going to be Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah are both going to say that. So yeah. And again, Rashi does hold that there is it is a legitimate read to say that it's talking about an actual friend, but we're going to save that for next time. But yeah, so I'm really curious to number 2. So what role does, if we just got through like saying that a Rav is so necessary, so then how do books factor in? Yeah, Vanessa?
Maybe books aren't the primary way we're supposed to learn. We're supposed to learn with checks and balances, so to speak, with sort of all the reasons we mentioned.
Yeah.
But the thing that separates books from just you reading the Torah on your own and just coming up with your own ideas is that someone else wrote that book, so you're still engaging with someone else's ideas.
Okay, that's good. So so I think number 1 is I guess, yeah. So let's just do several ideas here. Okay, so number 1 is the next best thing to a, it's gonna sound horrible. The next best thing to a living Rav is a dead Rav. Okay, what I mean by that is, not that you should hire a hitman for your Rav, but that a living Rav is good for all the reasons we said. Okay, but there are benefits to learning from great thinkers in the past, and the only way you can do that, great thinkers and I don't just want to say great thinkers, I'm just great chachamim, okay? in the past, and the only way to do that is through their writings. Okay, and yeah, you miss out on all the benefits, the benefits we listed, but you get access to their chachma from their writings. Okay, so it is a you can't go too far and say that a person should only learn from a living Rav. And also, I would say, like, and hopefully this is true for everyone here, is that, like, in many ways, being an active reader is more active than being an active listener. Okay, and certainly a passive listener. Okay. The first Mortimer Adler book I read was How to Read a Book. And that was the first time that I really had someone spell out for me what it means to be an active reader. And like that develops you in ways that are not impossible to do with a human being because it's just a different channel. But like it is training your mind in like, okay, just take the let me look at the I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm going to resist the temptation. But let's go to Great Ideas, Notes on Adler, How to Read a Book, Guidelines. Right. So, like, there's the 4 questions that we ask when we learn Tehillim. Okay. What is this book about as a whole? What is being said in detail, and how is this book true in whole or in part, or what of it? Okay. Those are like the basic questions. If you did that about everything you read, like that's going to you're going to get a lot out of it. Okay. But then he has all these methods of systematic pre-reading, then superficial reading, and then in analytical reading, classifying the book, stating what the book is about with the utmost brevity, enumerating the major parts in their order and relation and outlining them, defining the problem or problems the author is trying to solve, coming to terms with the author and interpreting their key words, grasping the author's leading propositions by dealing with his most important sentences, knowing the author's arguments by finding them in or constructing them out of sequences of sentences, determining which of the problems the author has solved, which ones he has not, and as to the latter, decide which the author knew he had failed to solve. 9, do not begin criticism until you've completed your outline, your interpretation of the book. Okay, then he gives reasons. So in other words, if you follow like principles of active reading, you're going to develop a lot, and you cannot do that in the same way with just listening to a Rav, even if you're engaging in the conversation. And again, you get development from that process that you can't get from books, but both of them yield development. Okay, in other words, both kinds of learning, okay, from a Rav and from books develop you in different ways. Yeah, Alex?
It's interesting because I was thinking along very similar lines, but in my head, I was thinking more from like a midot perspective, like things you read really affect what you value, how you view the world, what you think of the world. So for me, it kind of in the same way, a friend really impacts how you relate to the world. So do books. Like,
oh, that's interesting. Okay, so and you're saying that as opposed to the Rav, because with books, presumably you're choosing what to read?
yeah, I think so. Because like, say you're in a community with 3 Ravs, right?
Yeah.
Presumably you have more access to books than Ravs.
Yeah.
And like, I think we've all felt the impacts of this when you're in a season of life where you're reading like pointless trash books. It impacts your thinking.
None of us do that. Yeah, no, yeah, right. And more in the way, more like in the way you you are shaped by your friends. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I got a I have my different, I'm pointing to my bookshelves in my apartment, but like I have a bookshelf, the central bookshelf here where I keep the books. It's the smallest of my bookshelves. And so what I do basically is the books that have impacted me are in that shelf. And then like whenever I get a new book that impacts me in a real way, I swap it out with the one that is faded. So like I've got like this visual reminder of like all the books that have impacted me like lately. And yeah, it's I agree. Books can change your whole trajectory of Wolves and Men as an example. Yeah, Racheli?
Okay. I don't know if this makes so much sense, but maybe like making a Rav for yourself is referring to like outside of the home, like not professional, but more like classes are at a set time and whatever.
Mhm.
And then friendship equals downtime. So when
Okay,
you
okay,
have
that's good. That's good. So
downtime, then you should still be learning and using your mind and finding new things in more like isolated forms.
okay, good. That's a good shot. So the learning with the Rav is more formal and occurs in specific, communal, official contexts, whereas the books you hang out with are more during your downtime and informal learning, which should also be occupied with Chachma. Yeah, that is good. Yeah, it's I try not to be judgmental, but it really is hard if you walk into a home and there's just no books. Like you've been, I'm sure you've been to people where it's just like, and it's probably not their fault. It's their parents' fault, but like, you're just like, you guys just don't read. Like you don't have your kids, reading. It's just like, and then you do wonder, especially if they're Jews who have Shabbos, like what are they doing in their downtime? Like I just don't know, but yeah, so I have a hard time not judging people for that. Yeah. Okay, good. I think this is good. Again, I don't know if we exhausted what Rashi said, but I think we got enough to say that there are two channels of learning here, of the Rav and the books. Okay, so now let's move on to Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah, and here I do want to compare and contrast them. Okay, so we'll read, translate, and then compare and contrast. And we'll save the friend stuff for next time. Okay, so the Rambam I did translate myself. Actually no, I translated and I had ChatGPT check it, but I haven't checked the ChatGPT checking. Okay. So Aseh Lecha Rav, Vafilu lo. Oh, we did this earlier this year because we had the mishnah that says be a tail to foxes and not be a head to jackals. And the Rambam there said, do not teach people who are lower than you. And then we said, well, what about what the Rambam says here? And then we read this. So if this sounds familiar, that's why. Okay. It says Vafilu lo haya lo roi lecha. Rav, even if he's not worthy to be your Rav, Aseh oso lecha Rav, you should still make him your Rav. So that's where the Rav is saying make him, which implies a certain artificiality. Okay. So that you can engage in discussion and debate with him, and your learning will be established in your hand. Okay. The ChatGPT says that thereby endure. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to say no, but will thereby be firmly established in your hand. Okay. For a person's learning is not the same when he learns on his own as it is when he learns from another. See, this is not a good translation. When he learns from another. Okay, person's learning is not the same by himself as it is when he learns from another. Ki limudo mizulaso, because learning from another, miskaim biado, becomes more firmly established, umisbarer yoser, and more clearly understood, or more clarified. Vafilu haya kmohu b'chachma u'pachzim mimeno, even if he is equal to him in wisdom or less than him. V'kach biaru b'ferish tzava azo. So this is what I was trying to find right before shiur. He says, thus they, meaning Chazal, explain the meaning of this teaching. And it said, Ksubos, I was looking at this other edition of the Rambam, Ksubos 111a, but I couldn't find it. So we're going to ignore that for now. Yeah, okay. So that's the Rambam. Okay. So hold that thought. Let's do Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay. Very short. Aseh lecha Rav, shafilu ata yodea kamohu, even if you know as much as he does, aseh oso Rav alecha, appoint him as your Rav. Mipnei she'adam zocher ma shalimdo, because a person remembers ma shalimdo rabo, more of what his teacher has taught him, yoser mima she'adam lamen me'atma, more than what he has learned on his own. The od, moreover, ki pa'amim yavin hadavar yoser, one will understand a matter more clearly mimenu, through him, v'nimtza malamda, and thus will end up. Oh, that's interesting. Thus will end up teaching him. That's interesting. That's not how I translated it, but that's a plausible translation. Vafilu im shneim shavim b'chachma, even if they're equal in wisdom. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to put these side by side. Okay, and my question is, where do they agree and where do they disagree? Because you'll notice they use slightly different language. I mean, the part where they agree, just factually, they agree about what the advice is. Oh, sorry, that's not the case. Hold on a second here. I'm just going to write this out. Where do Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah agree, and where might they disagree? So let's start with where they agree. Yeah, Alex?
Seems that they agree that learning takes on a different form when it's kind of in community and bouncing off another person.
Okay, that is true. So they agree that yeah, I'll say the first part just factually. They agree that to make someone your Rav, even if they're equal to you. And two, that's number one. And two, that the learning impacts you differently when it takes place with another person than it does when you're by yourself. Okay, so that's their agreement. Okay, they might disagree on the following. Okay, I say might because I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to post this in the chat just so you can have access to it. Boom and boom. What subtle differences do you notice here that might be an actual difference? Yeah, Alex?
It seems like Rabbeinu Yonah finds almost no, wait, it's Rambam. Yeah, Rambam finds almost like an adversarial.
Oh,
goal
sorry.
where-
This is supposed to say Rambam and Yonah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like one of them is saying there's almost not adversarial exactly, but like there is more of a like a debating back and forth, kind of like a sparring, an intellectual sparring, if you will.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, so Rambam mentions the back and forth, whereas Rabbeinu Yonah does not. Good, that's a good observation. That's the kind of thing that we're looking for here. So another difference, and again, you could argue with me, but you notice what the Rambam says. He says, even if he is equal to him in wisdom or less than him. Rabbeinu Yonah only says, even if you know as much as he does, and even if they're equal in wisdom. So the difference seems to be, both mention learning with someone who is equal to you, but the Rambam includes someone who knows less than you, whereas Rabbeinu Yonah doesn't. Okay. Now, again, you could just say, well, he meant it, but he didn't say it. And we know that the Rabbeinu Yonah learned the Rambam because Rabbeinu Yonah very frequently quotes the Rambam's Pirush on Pirkei Avos. So we can assume that if he wanted to say that, he would have said it in the name of the Rambam or just said the same as the Rambam. Okay, this next one's subtle. And this one, again, you could say that they mean the same thing. Okay, I'm going to highlight it in Hebrew. Okay, Rambam uses the phrase, Yiskayim Talmudcha biyadecha, your learning will be firmly established in your hand, and Kilimim Miskayim biyado, the learning from another will be established in your hand. Okay. Established in his hand. Okay. So that's the term Rבינו Yonah uses. Oh, sorry, the Rambam uses. Rבינו Yonah, though, uses the term Adam zocher ma shelimdo rabo. A person remembers what his teacher taught him. Okay. Now you could just say the Rambam also means memory, but he does not say memory. He says it's established in your hand. Okay. And I want to just try to bring an argument. This is going to open up a miniature can of worms, like a sardine-sized can of worms. That the Rambam does mean two different things. Is when he's talking about the ideal way to learn. So he uses the term miskaim biado in several cases. So in Hilchos Torah 3:12, when he's talking about how to get the crown of Torah, he says, "Ein divrei Torah miskaimim b'misha merape atmo alehem." The words of Torah are not firmly established in someone who is lax about them. Nor in people who learn amid like pampering or eating and drinking. Ela b'misha memis atmo alehem. The Torah only persists in someone who literally kills himself over them, umitzayir gufo tamid, and afflicts his body constantly, v'lo yitin shanas le'inav, and does not give sleep to his eyelids, la'afafav tenufa, and slumber to his eyelids. Amru chachamim derech remez zos Torah haTorah adam ki yamos be'ohel. This is what the Chachamim meant by way of drush when they said, "This is the Torah when a person dies in the tent." The Torah only is firmly established in someone who kills himself in the tents of Torah. Okay. Similarly, he says, "Oh, this just disproves me." All right. Well, I'll read it anyway. This disproves me. He says here, "Amru chachamim bris krusa shekol hayagiv b'talmuda b'veis hakneses lobim herahu mishakeach." The covenant is sealed with anyone who toils in Torah in shul. Funny, not in base medrash, in shul. Lobim herahu mishakeach. He will not quickly forget. V'chol hayagiv b'talmud b'tzina. Anyone who exerts himself in Torah in like modesty, machkim, will become wise. Shnemar zez v'esnuim chachma. The chachma is with the modest. Kol hamashmiya kol b'shas talmudo. Anyone who makes his voice audible at the time of his learning, talmudo miskaim biado. His learning will be established in his hand. But someone who reads silently, he'll forget quickly. So maybe he is using the terms interchangeably. Yeah, okay. Your hand was up. What were you going to say or ask?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that these are both like answering the question of like, this is obvious. Like, obviously, you need a Rav. So they're saying you might think you shouldn't make someone a Rav who is not truly worthy.
Right.
But, okay. I just
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. All right. Yeah, that's how he's answering that question. Yeah, you might think that a Rav has to be superior to you, and no, even I mean, look, ideally that's the case, but if you don't have that, or in addition to that, you still need to oh, hi Charles, you still need to make someone a Rav if he's equal to you. Okay, so again, I don't. You can disagree with me. You could just say that the Rambam does mean remembering. Okay, another subtle difference here is Rambam says a person's learning is not the same by himself as it is when he learns from another, since learning from another becomes more firmly established in his hand and more clarified. Okay. And he used the word, again, Rambam did not write in Hebrew for this. He wrote in Judeo-Arabic, and I don't know enough to assess this, but the Hebrew is misbarer yoser. It will become clearer. Okay. Rבינו Yonah, though, does this. He says, why should you learn from another person who's equal to you? A person remembers more of what his teacher taught him. Moreover, there are times when one will understand a matter more clearly through him and will end up teaching him. Okay, so he uses the word understand a matter more clearly. Okay, so the fact that the Rambam does not advertise this as a separate benefit and uses the word clarify versus Rבינו says you will remember it more and you'll understand it better seems to be highlighting two different things. Okay, so I'm just going to write that here. Rambam mentions one benefit is learning with someone else will cause the matter to be more firmly established and clarified, whereas Rabbeinu Yonah divides the benefits into two. One, you'll remember it more, and two, sometimes you'll understand it more. Okay, Rambam doesn't mention understanding specifically, though he does talk about back and forth. So this is why I think it's up for debate. Are Rabbeinu Yonah and Rambam just saying the same thing in different words, or is there a difference? And I do think that the biggest difference is that Rabbeinu Yonah does not mention learning with someone who's less than you. Okay, so in the chat, Rivka says, maybe I'm reading into this, but is the Rambam saying that one might think they get it, but they don't actually get it? I think that is true, but I also think that could be in Rabbeinu Yonah. Like, I think that could work out for both of them, which is why the debate might happen. Unless you want to say that that's specifically why he's talking about debate, where one guy says it's this way and the other person says it's that way. But like, I don't see anything in the Rambam Yonah which would lead me to rule that out. But the Rambam does seem to be talking about that more, so I agree with that reading of the Rambam. Anyone have any ideas? The question is, where do the Rambam and Rambam Yonah agree, and where might they disagree, and why? Okay, and I guess what is the significance of the difference? So I'm listing here. I think they definitely disagree with this part. Rambam only mentions learning with Rabbeinu Yonah only mentions someone learning with someone who's equal to you, but not less than you. Okay, so just seemingly then, Rabbeinu Yonah would say, do not make a Rav of someone who knows less than you, whereas Rambam would say that you should. Rivka in the chat says, does one of them understand something better from learning with someone whom is misunderstanding something, whereas one gets an extra perspective? That's a good call. So it does sound like Rabbeinu Yonah is saying that if you understand something more than the person who you're learning with, you'll end up teaching him, and then that will give you a deeper dimension of learning. Whereas Rambam puts it in terms of debate. Okay, that's a good possibility. So let me write that down, and then I'll call on people whose hands are up on the thing. So possible differences. Okay, so Rabbeinu Yonah emphasizes that sometimes you'll understand something better than your Rav Rusa, and you'll end up learning better because you need to teach him. Okay, Rambam, who mentions back and forth, seems to be putting the emphasis on two people having different perspectives, okay, and convincing each other which one is right. Okay, not necessarily. It's funny though, because the Rambam is the one who does not mention, or who does seem to include people who are on a lower level. So you would think he would mention the teaching thing, but this is a good observation, though.
That was my question. Where does it say that Rabbeinu Yonah says you're going to teach him? I understood it the opposite.
Yeah, so that's when I read this on Shabbos, the way I read it is Pa'amim Yavin Hadavar Yoser Mimenu V'Nimsa Malamdo. I read this that sometimes your friend will understand something better and he will teach you. This is saying that ChatGPT understood it to mean that you'll understand something better and you will teach him. But
I don't see that in English translation. That's why I'm a bit confused.
There are times when one will understand a matter more clearly through him.
Oh, I don't know how I missed that.
Or because of him, maybe is a better thing, or from him, than him, I think is better, than him, and will thus end up teaching him. Yeah. I think that's a better translation. Yeah, but does you say something else also? Or that was your question?
I think I was gonna say the same thing as Rivka, but you were still fleshing it out.
Okay. Tamar?
Second. I think I have a question that's more of a question on Rambam and Yonah,
Yeah.
which is maybe what's the benefit of making someone your teacher instead of, like you said, like a chavrusa?
Right. So the funny thing also is he does then go in hold on, my watch just made a beep. In the Knei Lecha Chaver, he says, I'm just gonna sneak peek for next week for Knei Lecha Chaver. Rabbeinu Yonah says, there's three reasons for having a good friend. Okay, he says, Knei Lecha Chaver, l'shalosh devarim tzarich adam el hachaver tov. You need friend for three things. Ha'echad l'divrei Torah. First one is for words of Torah. Kamosha Amar, as it says, Harbe limadati mirabosai umechaveri yosem mirabosai umitamidi yosem mikulam. I've learned much from my friends, from my teachers, and from my friends more than from my teachers, and from my students more than from all of them. So he is including this category of learning from your friends being different than learning from your teachers. So where does he draw the line here is the question. I'll add this as a question here. Is where is this? Hold on here. Okay, question on Rabbeinu Yonah, which is in the next clause, Rabbeinu Yonah differentiates between learning from a Rav and learning from friends. So which category is he talking about here? With a Rav who is a friend. Is that your question?
Yeah, and I think it's also the question on this explanation. If, let's say, there's someone that you can learn from, but he has less knowledge than you, then why would you make him your Rav as opposed to making him your chavrusa?
Right. Yeah. It's a good question. Okay, you know what? Yeah, Vanessa?
Maybe there's something to the like psychologically there's something to the putting yourself in a like putting the Rav in like the more dominant position, like it's a different dynamic. Like there's instead of two equals conversing together and just debating on equal footing, like if you're making someone your Rav, you have to like accept what they're saying to an extent. Like you have to say like, okay, this person knows what they're talking about, and they're arguing this for a reason. Like you can't just dismiss them like you would a friend in the
Yeah,
same way.
that's interesting. I wonder though, like, how does that work practically? Does that actually work, or are you going to end up relating to them as a chavrusa? Like, I'm trying to imagine, have I ever had, I mean, I have had chavrusas with people who are more advanced than me, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about where they're equal to you. I'm trying to think, like, what would that be like to, or certainly someone less than you, to make them your Rav
Oh, I
with
also
all the
wonder,
psychological dynamics that you're saying, but you're functionally chavrusas,
I wonder if we're taking for granted something that we shouldn't, that we know the level of the person we're learning with. Like maybe they're not known for like their Torah, but like when you learn with them, actually know like they're the ones who have more insights and are in a better position to Rav you, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like maybe someone is like super learned and like has all the accolades and whatever, but like when you actually comes down to learning, like you're the one who has more insight and like you don't know. And I don't think the point is to know. I think the point is to like be in a position where you're submitting yourself to someone else's knowledge and like authority and working within that framework and trying. There's a difference with learning with a Rav and learning with a chavruta. Like right now, I'm learning with you. Like I am not talking the same way I would with a chavruta. I wouldn't push back as much. I have to like understand, even if I don't understand what you're saying, I'm a lot more willing to say, okay, Rav Shneweiss is saying this, so what is he saying? Like, there's a lot more mental clockwork going on than I would have with a friend. Not because I take either more or less seriously. It's just a different dynamic.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Okay, there's different psychological, I guess, stance or mode when you're learning with chavrusa versus learning from a Rav. For example, deferring, putting yourself in a receptive mindset, not pushing back in the same way. Okay. My question still is like, like, let's take someone, imagine here's the thought experiment. Take someone who's equal to you in Chachma, right? You can envision what it's like to learn b'chavrusa with them. But if you try to do what you're describing and say, I'm going to make you my Rav, to me, it would just end up in chavrusa dynamics. So like, I acknowledge the category you're saying of like learning with Rav is different, but like it would end up being chavrusa dynamics, I think. Unless I just haven't had the experience, or I'm not connecting the experience in the right way. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I also wonder if you're saying that because you are a Rav.
No, because I've been even before I was a Rav, like, you know, I've had this
Okay.
position before also, you know. Yeah, give me 1 second. I want to see if this is an example. Interesting. Okay, I mean the one example I can think of. You know, now that I think about it, there is a category of students. There are certain Talmidim I've had, and certain chavrusas I've had. Okay, maybe this is what you were talking about. Okay, there are cases where you're totally in equal positions. Okay, and then there are other cases where you're in equal positions, but like, you know that in certain cases, like, you need to defer to them in Rav mode because they're just so much more advanced than you in intuition or in knowledge. But I don't know. To me, that's what a chavrus is. I don't know. I have a hard time with this. I hear what you're trying to say. I just have a hard time identifying with it. I don't know. Yeah, Alex?
I think also it's important to take into account the audience of Pirkei Avos. Like,
That's true.
if you're someone at such a high level, like even today, like the biggest chachamim, the biggest educators, like they all have poseks somewhere,
Yeah,
you know?
right. Yeah.
So like, I think when you take into account the context of the audience, it makes more sense because if you are at that high enough a level, there is a amount of humbling oneself that is required to say, well, this person I still have to defer to.
Yeah, right. All right, that's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. Maybe that's why I can't relate to it, because I'm not on a level. Yeah. Yeah, Rachel, did you have your hand up?
No, I changed my mind.
Okay. So I think I'm gonna make an executive decision here. I don't know if this is a thing that just happens with age. Usually I like this clock change back, but this week I have been getting so tired at like right now it's 8:30, but my body definitely says it's 9:30. So my usual 9:30 shutdown, which we would have in years past on Thursday night when our shiur started at 8, I'm having right now. So like I think I gotta stop for tonight. But let's do this. Let's continue to think about this. Next time we'll start off by quickly reviewing the leftover questions and then go on to Knei Lecha Chaver. Okay. I really like that we were doing this thoroughly, and I'm very pleased with the Rashi. Again, like I said, it's a very, you know, the pleasing thing about Rashi on Avos is he's very concise. And as you can see, like, there's just a lot to think about. And so I'm glad we got a lot out of the Rashi. Okay, so Bli Neder next week should be good. The week after that, I believe, let me just check the dates here. Yeah, so the 13th should be good. The 20th is the week of parent-teacher conferences, and I need to be in West Hartford for almost the entire week. So I am surely going to cancel shiur on that Thursday. I have a request in to see if Jesse will give shiur, and then the Thursday after that, the 27th, is Thanksgiving. So definitely no one's going to give shiur then. Okay, so just so next week, tentative. I mean, planning, yes, and then after that, 2 weeks off. Or sorry, 1 week off from me, 2 weeks off from me. Hopefully Jesse, but then no, you know, I'm not planning again until the 4th. Okay. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night. Good Shabbos to those I'm not seeing tomorrow, and hopefully see some of you tomorrow.
Good
Thank you so
Shabbos.
much.
Thank you. Shabbat
Bye.
shalom.
Bye.
I don't show up.